Hey guys, tonight we're going to venture somewhere truly grim, a place of mud, rats, and relentless gunfire, the trenches of World War I. Forget the glory and trumpets you read about in history books. The reality is, you probably wouldn't last a single day. Before we get started, take a second to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our little community checking in from all over the world. Now get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe turn on a gentle fan for some background white noise. Let's ease into the Great War's front lines together. Congratulations, or maybe condolences. You've just woken up in France, 1916, in a frontline trench on the Western Front. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Well, pretty much everything else. Dawn light is just starting to glow over the shattered trees and shell craters. You blink awake on a wooden plank covered by your damp blanket inside a dugout that's barely taller than a coffin. All around you is wet, cold earth reinforced with sandbags and scrap wood. This little dirt alcove is your bedroom, living room, and sanctuary, such as it is, from bullets and shrapnel. You have exactly zero of the comforts you're used to. No memory foam mattress, no plush pillow, not even a decent bed of straw. Just a scratchy wool blanket that smells like smoke, sweat, and mildew. It's been months since it was properly washed, and it's so impregnated with mud and grime that it feels like canvas. Your wake-up call isn't an alarm on your phone. It's your sergeant's boot nudging you in the ribs and his hoarse whisper, "Stand to, stand to." In the trenches, sunrise is danger time. Armies often attack at first light, hoping to catch the other side off guard. So every morning, without fail, every soldier scrambles up, heart pounding, to man the fire step, that ledge of mud and sandbags you shoot from. Imagine being jolted from a fitful sleep and immediately having to grip your rifle, peer over the top of the trench into the eerie fog, and brace for a possible enemy assault. No snooze button here. If you ignore stand to, you might not live to see breakfast. You fumble for your rifle, a bolt-action weapon cold as ice and caked in mud from yesterday's rain. Your fingers are stiff. You might be only 19 or 20 years old, but your body feels ancient this morning. Everything aches. Your back is sore from sleeping curled up on the hard ground, and your knees creak as you stand, too many hours crouching. You're already exhausted, and the day has just begun. Welcome to trench life, where being tired is a permanent condition. Now you're up on the firing step, knees slightly bent, trying to present as little of your head as possible above the sandbag parapet. The sky is a dull grey, the kind of chilly, damp dawn that seeps into your bones. You inhale and your nose wrinkles at the smell, a pungent cocktail of wet earth, decaying sandbags, wood smoke, and something far worse, the underlying odour of rot and sewage. You'd gag if you weren't used to it by now. The trench is alive with stenches, months of stinking mud, soaked with spilled blood and littered with bits of shrapnel, have a smell all their own. Mix in the sweet-sour reek of rotting corpses just beyond the trench. There are bodies out in no man's land that no one can retrieve. The acrid tang of lingering poison gas from last week's attack, the ammonia of urine, the fetid smell of the latrine pit, plus the body odour of dozens of unwashed soldiers, and you've got an overpowering miasma that you can almost see hanging in the air. It's so bad that new recruits often literally vomit on their first day. But you've been here a little while, so you just grimace and carry on. In the trenches, you get used to anything, or you go insane. The light grows and you scan the scene over the trench wall. In front of you stretches no man's land, that hellscape between the opposing trenches. It's a torn-up mess of craters, barbed wire, charred tree stumps, and mud so thick it could swallow a horse. Nothing is moving out there right now except maybe some fog and the black silhouettes of crows perched on wreckage. The German trenches are a few 100 yards away across this expanse. You can't see them well. They're hidden by their own parapets and camouflage. But you know they're there, and you know enemy eyes might be watching. You hunch down just enough that only your helmet peeks over. Your breath hangs in the cold air. You clutch your rifle tightly, trying to ignore the cold seeping through your threadbare gloves. For these tense minutes at dawn, every trench on the line is on high alert. Sentries next to you strain their ears for any weird sounds. Everyone's heart is thumping, dawn attacks are common, and the uncertainty is nerve-wracking. Are they coming? Will the quiet suddenly explode into shouting and gunfire? You swallow, your mouth dry. There's a knot of fear in your stomach that tightens as the sky gets brighter. This is the moment of maximum tension. Soldiers call it the morning hate, because often both sides unleash some bullets or shell fire at first light, just to remind the other guys they're still there, and maybe to vent nerves. Sure enough, you hear a crack to your left, likely one of your own machine guns firing a short burst across no man's land, or maybe a nervous rifleman letting off a round. A few distant shouts echo down the line. You flinch, finger on your trigger, knuckles white. A part of you wants to duck down and cover your head, but you fight the urge and hold position. You have to. Everyone's life could depend on it. After an eternity, maybe 15 minutes by the clock, but it feels like an hour, the sky is fully light. No attack came this morning. A collective exhale seems to pass down the trench. "Stand down," comes the order. You release your tight muscles and finally lower your rifle, lungs aching because you hadn't realized you were holding your breath half the time. Relief floods you. One more dawn survived. You might make it to breakfast after all. As the tension eases, the routine of the day begins. A few of your trench mates mutter curses about the cold or that random shot earlier. One guy is even chuckling softly, maybe at a dark joke to cope with the nerves. Black humor is a soldier's friend. You're all trying to pretend you weren't just on the verge of panic. The unwritten rule: laugh when you can, because who knows what fresh hell the next hour will bring. Now comes one of the few small comforts of trench life, the rum ration. Yes, at barely 6:30 in the morning, the army issues a swallow of rum to each man. You climb down off the fire step and join the line as a corporal moves along with a stoneware jug marked SRD. Officially, that stands for Supply Reserve Depot, but the soldiers have dozens of cheeky nicknames for it. Soon runs dry, service rum diluted, or the bitterly accurate seldom reaches destination, because sometimes officers skim the good stuff for themselves. When your turn comes, you tilt your tin cup and receive a shot's worth of dark, strong rum. You gulp it down in one burning swig. It's harsh and raw, but immediately warms your insides and steadies your nerves. For a brief moment, you feel a tiny spreading bloom of heat in your belly and a bit of numbness in your brain, just enough to take the sharp edge off the morning. This is liquid courage, and also the closest thing to medicine you'll get today. Next up, breakfast, if you can call it that. Don't expect bacon and eggs. A fellow from the company's field kitchen arrives with a petrol tin half filled with lukewarm tea. Yes, petrol tin. Gas cans were repurposed to carry water or tea, and as you might imagine, they weren't always cleaned very well. Often the water for your tea tastes faintly of gasoline or oil. At least it masks the taste of whatever impurities are in the water. You pour the weak brown liquid into your mess tin and add 2 spoonfuls of sugar from your ration. It's so sweet, it's practically syrup, but that's intentional. You need the calories, and honestly, you need any flavor that isn't mud. Hot, overly sweet tea with a hint of petrol aftertaste is surprisingly comforting right now. To eat, you reach for your ration biscuit and a tin of bully beef. The biscuit, also known as hardtack, is a thick, heavy square, roughly the size of your palm. Stamped on it are the words Huntley and Palmer's, the company that mass produces these things. It's essentially a brick of flour, water and salt baked so hard that you could use it as a weapon. Soldiers joke these army biscuits are harder than the sandbags. You rap it against your helmet for effect. Clack, clack. Yep, feels like a tile. Last week a guy in your section cracked a tooth biting one dry. Lesson learned. You soften it in tea first. You dunk the biscuit into your tin cup and wait until the edges just start to disintegrate, then chew gingerly. It's still like gnawing on a piece of wood, but at least it doesn't break your jaw now. The taste is bland, slightly stale with a hint of mustiness. No butter, no jam today. You had a bit of plum and apple jam yesterday, but the jar's empty now. Now the bully beef. That's tinned corned beef, the staple of British rations. You use your bayonet to pry open the can, multitasking tools, and the smell of salted meat wafts out. To a starving man, it'd be heavenly. But you've been eating this almost every day, and you're frankly sick of it. It's a dense chunk of pinkish beef, suspended in gelatinous fat. In the cold morning air, the fat has formed a white, greasy layer. You scoop out a bit with your fingers and slap it onto a piece of biscuit. It's so salty it makes you pucker. But calories are calories. Chewing this salty, fatty beef, you daydream for a second about fresh eggs, or a hot loaf of bread, or anything that isn't canned, dried, or stale. If you're lucky, sometimes you get bread. In fact, a fresh delivery came up last night, a few enormous loaves baked behind the lines. They're about 3 pounds each and meant to be shared among several men. One of your mates managed to snag a hunk and kindly tears you off a chunk. It's days old, chewy and tough, but compared to hardtack, it's like cake. You savor it for 2 whole minutes. No butter, of course. Fats are rationed tightly. But someone offers a smear of that congealed beef fat from the bully beef tin, a makeshift trench butter. Not exactly Julia Child's cooking, but it'll do. Breakfast is washed down with another swig of that steamy, sugary tea. No milk. Fresh milk doesn't exactly make it to the trenches, but at least it's hot. As you drink, you notice a sheen on the surface of the tea, a little slick of oil or petrol from the container. You decide not to think about it and gulp it anyway. The warmth is what matters. By now the sun has cleared the horizon, though it might stay hidden behind clouds. With some caffeine, sugar and rum in your veins, you feel a tiny bit more human, albeit a human that hasn't bathed in weeks and sleeps in the dirt. Inspections come next. The lieutenant strolls down the trench, doing a quick once-over of the men and the position. You straighten up as best you can when he passes. In theory, you're supposed to be shaven, jacket buttoned, gear neat. In reality, on the front line, standard slip. Your face has a scruffy growth of beard. Shaving with cold water and a dull razor yesterday was more painful than going without, so you skipped it. You half expect the officer to chew you out for looking like a hobo, but he just gives a tired nod. He probably hasn't shaved in a couple of days either. No one has had a proper wash since moving up from reserve trenches. Frankly, you all look like scarecrows. Gaunt, muddy, with hollow eyes from lack of sleep. The officer knows combat readiness matters more than shiny boots right now, so he doesn't bother with a strict inspection. He does remind a couple of guys to clean their rifles, though. A mud-clogged rifle can and will misfire, maybe at the worst possible time. You make a mental note to check yours again later. You did wipe it down last night, but mud has a way of creeping into everything here. Now that stand-to and breakfast are done, the day settles into a routine. Contrary to what you might imagine, you're not constantly shooting or being shot at, thank goodness, or this war would only last hours. In fact, a lot of trench life is boredom and chores punctuated by bursts of sheer terror. With daytime comes a sort of uneasy quiet. Neither side likes to attack in broad daylight unless they're shelling or launching a major offensive, so the soldiers busy themselves with maintenance. There's plenty to maintain. Trenches don't take care of themselves. They sag, flood, collapse, and get obliterated by shell fire regularly, so constant repairs are needed just to survive living here. Your platoon sergeant barks assignments. Jones, you're on sentry at post B. Thompson and Reed, you're on a wiring party after dusk. Carter, latrine duty. And you, he points to you, you're on sandbag detail. Lucky you. Looks like you'll be reinforcing the trench walls. You sling on your gear and head over to a stack of empty sandbags. They're made of burlap and they rot quickly in the wet. Many of the ones lining the trench are already disintegrating into mush, which is dangerous. A weak parapet could cave in or expose you to enemy fire. So you have to constantly fill new bags with sticky clay mud and patch up the walls. It's messy, back-breaking work, lifting shovelfuls of gunk into sacks and then hefting the 40-50-pound bag into place. Within minutes, your hands are numb and filthy, your uniform splattered. Not that it matters. Your uniform was already a monument to mud. You sometimes wonder if your original khaki color is now more mud-brown than the mud itself. There's mud in layers, dried mud from last week flaking off, fresh wet mud soaking your knees and elbows and everything in between. Honestly, you're so coated you could be mistaken for a mud golem if you stood still too long. As you work, you remain crouched low. You're careful not to expose your head above the trench lip. Why? Because somewhere out there, an enemy sniper is always waiting. The moment you give him a clear target, whiz, crack, a bullet will announce itself and maybe take your head off. You've seen it happen. A comrade of yours just 2 days ago grew careless for a second. He stood up a bit too tall to adjust. Some barbed wire. A single rifle shot rang out from the German lines, and he dropped without a sound, a neat red hole in his forehead. He was dead before he hit the ground. The rest of you had to crouch there for an hour, unable to retrieve his body until dark. It's a harsh lesson. Keep your damn head down. So you do. You fill sandbags, stooped over. You move through the trench with a permanent hunch. It's horrible for your posture, but much better than an extra ventilation hole in your skull. Every so often, while hefting a sandbag, you pause and listen. The front is rarely completely silent. You catch the distant rumble of artillery, not here, but miles away. Someone's getting shelled. Closer by, you hear the sporadic crack of rifle fire. Maybe some newbies are nervously shooting at shadows, or perhaps an actual duel between snipers and a target of opportunity. Hard to tell. The wind carries weird sounds, a mix of clangs, shouts, maybe even a faint cry for a medic from no man's land that never ceases to haunt you. But no heavy bombardment in your sector at the moment, no furious machine gun barrages. It's what soldiers call a quiet day. Of course, quiet is relative, when a random bullet might zing overhead at any time, and every step could set off an unearthed shell. You keep working. Next task, draining water. Last night it rained, like seemingly every night in Flanders, and the trench floor is now a series of puddles and sticky mud pits. There are duckboards, wooden slats, laid on the ground to form a sort of makeshift boardwalk. They help keep your feet above the worst of the muck, but water and filth still collect everywhere. If you step off the duckboards, you might sink past your ankles. So you grab a dented metal bucket and begin bailing water from a low spot, tossing it up and over the parapet. It feels a bit futile. Any water you chuck out probably just seeps back eventually, but it's better than standing in a pond. Trench foot is the enemy you're fighting here. You've seen what trench foot can do. It starts with pale, blotchy, numb feet from days of constant wet and cold, then swelling, then a foul odour as fungal infection sets in and tissue literally starts to die. In extreme cases, the flesh blackens and gangrene sets in, meaning the doctors have to amputate your foot to save your life. Yeah, losing a foot because it was wet too long. That's the reality. So as tedious as bailing water is, it might save your feet. Speaking of feet, your sergeant calls for a foot inspection around mid-morning. This is one of those military rituals that seems absurd given the circumstances, but it's deadly serious. Every few days, especially after rain, officers or medics make the men take off their boots and socks to check for trench foot signs. So you peel off your boots, they're stuck on, and yank off your damp wool socks. The cold air hits your pruny, pale feet. You wiggle your toes and cringe. The skin is wrinkled and blanched from being wet for so long. But at least they're not black or smelling of rot. The sergeant gives them a quick glance and grunts. Dry those feet and change your socks. Sure, because you always have a spare pair of dry socks just lying around in this muddy wasteland, right? Actually, you do have a spare pair, but they're only slightly less wet than the ones you're wearing. Still, you obey. You reach into your pack for the other pair. They're stiff and clammy, but you hang the first pair on a line to maybe dry a bit and put on the dry ones. Part of the routine is also rubbing something on your feet, whale oil or grease, to create a waterproof barrier. The medic slathers a scoop of greasy oil on each foot and massages it in. It's unpleasant, but immediately the oily coating insulates a bit. You pull your boots back on, which are still waterlogged, so oh well, and get back to work. Meanwhile, down the trench, poor Carter on latrine duty is having the worst morning. The bathroom in a front-line trench is, to put it delicately, primitive. You have a couple of choices, none nice. Option 1, a large metal bucket placed in a dugout alcove at one end of the trench, shielded by some sacking for a modicum of privacy. This is the latrine pit, basically. When it's full, some unlucky soul has to drag it out and empty it, usually at night. Option 2. If a bucket's not available, or you can't leave your post, you might grab a smaller tin, like an empty food can, to relieve yourself, then toss the contents over the side of the trench, hoping the wind doesn't blow it back. Yes, that happens. There are strict rules against just peeing wherever you want in the trench. The smell is already bad enough, and urine eats at the wooden trench supports. But let's be real. When you've got diarrhea from bad rations or nerves, You might not make it to a designated spot, so plenty of soldiers have done their business in quiet corners when necessary, and the smell tells the tale. Right now, Carter is hauling the big latrine bucket out from the end of the trench. You're glad you're upwind as he passes by, gagging. The contents slosh, please, not on my boots, as he struggles to carry it up a short slope to ground level behind the trench. He'll go dump it in a deeper hole farther back and sprinkle quicklime or creosote to mask the stench. It's one of the most hated jobs in the trenches, but it has to be done or disease would spread even faster. You silently thank him for his service. Better him than you today. The unsanitary conditions are a ticking time bomb, and indeed, illness often accomplishes what bullets can't. Just about everyone is dealing with something. Chronic diarrhea. Dysentery lurks whenever sanitation fails. Coughs and colds that never go away. And trench fever, a mysterious illness that causes high fevers and joint pain. You won't learn this. Fact? But trench fever is actually caused by the lice that infest all of you, transmitting bacteria. To you, it's just another miserable sickness that sends men to the rear lines with raging headaches and fevers for weeks. Skin infections are rampant. Scratches fester in this filth, turning into oozing sores. You have a nasty boil on your thigh that you're keeping an eye on, hoping it doesn't turn septic. There's no real antibiotic here, just maybe some iodine, or if you're very lucky, an evacuation to a field hospital before infection kills you. Tetanus is another fear. The soil in these old farmlands is loaded with manure, and now decomposing human remains, perfect for tetanus bacteria. A tiny wound contaminated with that can lead to horrific muscle spasms and death. So you try hard to keep even minor cuts clean. Not easy when everything around you is coated in mud and germs. Chores continue. You join a couple of others to fix a section of collapsed trench wall where last week's shelling caved it in. Working with spades and pickaxes, you all dig out the fallen clods of dirt, shore it up with new sandbags and a few wooden boards. It's laborious. Every swing of the pickaxe into the heavy clay reminds you how exhausting manual labor is when you're underfed and underslept. You pause to catch your breath, sweat now trickling despite the chill. As you rest a moment, your eyes drift to the bayonets stuck in the trench wall above head height. Something odd. Then you remember, those are improvised hooks for hanging things. On one bayonet, someone's hung a photograph in a mud-smeared frame. You peer at it. It's a faded portrait of a woman and a baby, likely the wife and child of one of the men. Beside it, dangling from a nail, is a rosary. Little personal touches like this remind you that this dark, rat-infested ditch is home for now. Soldiers decorate their bits of trench with whatever tokens of normal life they can. Photos, a torn page from a calendar, a lucky charm. It's strangely touching, and for a second you feel a pang of homesickness, so sharp it almost hurts more than your blisters. But you shake it off. Can't go getting sentimental. Not when you need to stay alive. A couple hours into the morning, the mail arrives. Yes, miraculously, even in the trenches, mail call happens. Military runners risk their necks, bringing sacks of letters and parcels from the rear. When the postman, a muddy private like the rest of you, comes hobbling along the trench, everyone who isn't on guard duty gathers eagerly. Letters from home are as precious as gold out here. They remind you what you're fighting for, or at least that there's a world beyond mud and blood. You receive a letter from your mother. The envelope is stained and a little damp, but her handwriting is on it, and your heart skips with excitement. You slide your dirty finger under the flap to tear it open, careful not to rip the precious paper. As you read, you can almost hear her voice. She talks about mundane things, the garden, the neighbor's new baby, how proud she is of you, how she prays every day for your safety. You smile at the line where she scolds you to dress warmly, don't catch a cold. You almost laugh. If only she knew the reality. But you wouldn't want her to know how bad it is. You're thankful her image of you is maybe sitting by a campfire with comrades, not cowering in a flooded trench. There's no mention of the war beyond hopes that it will end soon. She encloses a small parcel of socks and chocolate. Oh, bless her. Dry socks. You could weep with gratitude. And real chocolate, slightly melted and re-hardened into an odd shape. But still, you break off a square and let it melt on your tongue. It tastes like heaven, rich and sweet, a stark contrast to the bland rations. For a moment, with chocolate in your mouth and your mother's kind words in your hand, you forget the misery around you. You pocket the rest to savor later. Not everyone gets good news, though. A pal of yours, Donnie, slumps down after reading his letter. You pat his shoulder, and he says his girl back home has broken off their engagement. She couldn't take waiting, apparently. He tries to laugh it off, but you can see the pain in his eyes. War is tough enough without heartbreak from afar. You and a couple of lads try to cheer him up, promising him a share of your chocolate or a swig of whiskey if anyone has any left. Camaraderie here is all you have. These other soldiers, strangers a year ago, are now like brothers. You tease each other, confide in each other, and in the worst moments, you've cried together. There's a bond forged in the trenches that's unlike any friendship in civilian life. It has to be, because you depend on each other to survive. By around noon, chores slow down. The higher-ups know not to push men too hard in daylight, where any above-ground movement risks drawing fire. Plus, if you've been up since before dawn, you're already drained. Many soldiers try to catch some sleep in the early afternoon. Nights are often even busier and more dangerous than days, so any chance to snooze is welcomed. You volunteer for the next sentry shift so a buddy can get some shut-eye, and in exchange he'll take a later shift for you. Fair trade. You settle into a spot where you can keep watch, peeking through a periscope perhaps. Periscopes are handy. They let you scan over the trench without risking your head. It's basically two mirrors in a wooden frame. You hold it up and get a view of no man's land. Every trench has a few. You scan the devastated landscape through the periscope. It's eerily calm. Sunlight, if the sun is out, throws stark shadows from coils of rusty barbed wire strewn about. You see the glint of stagnant water in craters. Off to the far right, there's a hint of movement. Maybe a rat or a stray dog nosing among the debris. No sign of Germans creeping up. They're likely lying low in their own trenches, resting or doing exactly what you are. As you stand there quietly, your mind wanders. This might be the worst part of trench life. The waiting. Fear is exhausting, but monotony can drive you mad in a different way. Hours and hours can pass with nothing happening. You're stuck in a narrow, dull world of mud walls with nothing new to see or do. The ache in your legs, the itch of lice, the distant drip of water from the trench revetments, those become your whole universe. You crave any distraction. Some guys scribble in diaries or play cards if they're off duty. You don't have a deck on you, though. Instead, you find yourself absently picking at your shirt seams, and lo and behold, you catch a louse. The tiny pale insect is running for its life between the folds of your uniform. With a grim smile, you crush it firmly between your thumbnails. Gotcha. This, my friend, is what passes for entertainment here. Louse hunting. The men even have a term for it. They call it chatting, as if it's a pleasant social activity. You might see two soldiers sitting back to back, shirts off, methodically picking lice off each other and cracking them with the sound of popping knuckles. It's gross, yes, but also oddly satisfying. Each killed louse is one less biting your flesh and sucking your blood, and with millions of them infesting the trenches, you'll never run out of targets. It's not just one or two lice, by the way. You are crawling with them. Everyone is. They live in the seams of your dirty uniform, especially in the folds of your woolen shirt and under your armpits, where it's warm. They bite and irritate your skin, raising red, itchy welts. At night, when you try to sleep, you can sometimes actually feel them moving on you, a creepy, crawly sensation that never truly goes away. You haven't had a proper delousing in a while. When units rotate to the rear, they usually get a chance to boil their clothes or run them through delousing machines, big steam ovens. But up here at the front, you just have to endure it. Some inventive fellows take a candle and run the flame along their clothing seams. The heat makes the lice pop like tiny popcorns, another strangely satisfying game. But be careful not to burn your only shirt in the process. From these lice you might catch the aforementioned trench fever, but that can take weeks to lay you low, so it's a distant worry. More immediate is the sheer discomfort. You scratch at your chest and groan softly. Honestly, the itching can drive you mad if you think about it. Perhaps that's one reason everyone smokes so much. Aside from nicotine and nerves, the smoke helps mask body odor and maybe even stupefies the bugs a bit. You reach for a cigarette now. Tobacco is part of your rations and highly prized. With a match, you light to the end and take a long drag. It's harsh but calming. A plume of bluish smoke rises and swirls. You know the scent can carry, but in daytime it's generally okay. At night, a glowing cigarette can be as dangerous as a flashlight to a sniper's eyes. The afternoon wears on. You catch yourself dozing off for a minute on sentry duty and force your eyes open. Falling asleep on watch is a big no-no and could get you court-martialed. To wake up, you decide to do something useful and check your bayonet. Pulling the long blade from its scabbard, you examine it. It's fairly clean, but a few specks of rust concern you. You find a rag and some oil and give it a quick polish. It's ironic. This shiny blade has one purpose: stabbing the enemy in close combat, something you hope never to experience. But it's part of your kit, and it must be ready. Many nights you've slept with this bayonet fixed on your rifle, just in case of a sudden raid. The thought of using it on a person makes your stomach twist. You've heard the horror stories from older soldiers about bayonet fights in the dark, short, brutal, unspeakably bloody. You push that thought away, as you often do. No sense dwelling on nightmares while awake. Around this time you also tend to your rifle maintenance. Your rifle, a Lee Enfield bolt action, is your lifeline. A jam at the wrong time could kill you, so you periodically strip it down as best you can in the field, wipe the parts free of mud and carbon and oil it lightly. It's tricky to keep muck out of it in this environment. Mud has a way of creeping into every crevice. You once even found a tiny snail inside the trigger guard. How on earth? For now, though, the rifle seems in working order. You slide a fresh 5-round stripper clip of ammo into the magazine, ensuring it's loaded in case of emergency. The metallic snick-snick of rounds feeding is a common sound here. You click the safety on. You don't want an accidental discharge, and set the rifle within arm's reach. Every man does this instinctively. You never let your weapon stray far. Your stomach rumbles a bit. It's been a few hours since that meager breakfast. There's no formal lunch in the trenches. You just eat something from your rations when you can. So you reach into your haversack for the small cloth bag that holds today's ration portion. Let's see. A couple of those rock-hard biscuits still left. A tin of McConaughey stew, perhaps. Yes, there's a tin. McConaughey is a canned stew of meat and vegetables, mostly turnips and carrots, named after the company that makes it. When heated, it's actually not terrible. Warm food is a luxury. But cold from the can, it's pretty nasty. A greasy, congealed lump with a layer of orangey fat. You don't exactly have heating facilities at the front line. Lighting a cooking fire or stove here is usually forbidden during the day. Smoke draws enemy attention, and dangerous at night. Sometimes the cooks manage to bring hot food up to the front in big insulated containers under cover of darkness. But in daytime you're stuck with cold rations. You crack open the McConaughey tin now. The gelatine wiggles as you scoop some into your mouth. It's amazingly bland, yet salty at the same time. The turnips are mush, the bit of meat stringy, but it's fuel. You choke it down and wash it with a gulp of water from your canteen. The water has a faint chemical taste. They purify it with chlorine to kill germs, which is good, but it's like drinking weak bleach. At least you've got that tea earlier to mask it. After your lunch, you indulge in another little treat. A piece of the chocolate your mother sent. It's slightly soft in the mild warmth of the day. You pop it in and let it melt slow. If you close your eyes, you could almost be sitting at home, safe and sound, with a cup of cocoa. Almost. A sudden thump and distant boom snap you back to reality. You jerk your eyes open, hand instinctively grabbing your helmet strap. That sounded like artillery, but far off. Maybe our guns testing something, or the Germans shelling a sector down the line. Hard to know. Around you, a few others also pause, ears perked. When nothing further happens nearby, the tension lessens. Still, you remain a bit on edge. Random shelling is a fact of life. Both sides occasionally lob a few artillery shells at the enemy trenches outside of major offensives, just to harass or keep them guessing. Often it achieves nothing except ramping up everyone's blood pressure. There's even a darkly humorous term for it, windage or wastage, the steady trickle of daily random casualties that happen even in quiet times. You might not be in a big battle today, but perhaps a sniper picks off one guy, a shell fragment gets another, maybe a couple fall sick. And just like that, your company loses a few men per day without any ground-changing hands. Multiply that by hundreds of days, and you begin to grasp the meat grinder that is trench warfare. You try not to think about the math of it. It's afternoon now, and you feel the weight of fatigue. Exhaustion is constant here. It's not just physical from hard work. It's mental and emotional. You're always under stress, hearing the sounds of war, knowing death could fall from the sky any second. It wears you down. You lean back against the trench wall and let your eyes drift upward to the strip of sky visible above, a dull blue-grey ribbon framed by sandbags. You can't see much else. It's almost like living in a grave, you think, with the earth walls around you and just that slit of sky overhead. How many men have essentially been buried alive in trenches like this, never seeing more of the world than this narrow view. The thought makes you shiver. Some days, it honestly feels like the trench itself wants to swallow you, especially when a big shell hits and the walls cave in. You've dug out a fellow once who got buried in a collapse. By the time you reached him, he was nearly suffocated, coughing up dirt, eyes bulging in panic. He survived, only to be killed by shrapnel a week later. It's absurd sometimes. Who lives and who dies out here? You pinch yourself to stay awake and aware. No enemy action yet, but you don't want to daydream too deep. To occupy your mind, you chat quietly with another sentry nearby. He's an older guy, might be 30, ancient by frontline standards. He's on his second year in the trenches, and he's seen it all. He tells you a funny story about how, during a quiet sector ceasefire, he and a German soldier traded insults and cans of beef by throwing them across the wire to each other. The German apparently yelled in broken English, "Your Kaiser is a sauerkraut," to which one of our guys yelled back, "Your king is a donkey." It became a competition of who could come up with the silliest slur. In the end, both sides laughed and waved. The unofficial truce lasted until a stern officer caught on and put a stop to their fraternizing. Your comrade shakes his head, chuckling. Imagine that, playing catch with bully beef with Jerry, like we were at a picnic. The notion that the enemy are humans just like you, equally miserable, equally wishing for home, is both comforting and troubling. Officially, they're devils to be killed, but the longer you're here, the more you suspect they hate this war as much as you do. Afternoon drags on. The weather starts to turn, clouds loom, and a fine rain begins to fall, as if the ground weren't muddy enough. You sigh and pull a waterproof ground sheet over your shoulders. It's basically a sheet of treated canvas that doubles as rain cape and ground cover. The rain intensifies, tapping on your helmet and running down the backs of your ears. Soon the bottom of the trench floods anew. You stamp your feet occasionally to keep blood flowing. The temperature drops, and now you're shivering. There's no dry spot to escape to. Some trenches have dugouts reinforced with wood or corrugated iron where you can shelter. But in the front line, those are often small, damp, and prone to collapse if hit. Your dugout can perhaps hold 3 or 4 men sitting shoulder to shoulder. It's already crowded with 2 sleeping fellows and gear, so you remain outside at your post, enduring the shower. The mud underfoot becomes even more treacherous, a slick sludge that sucks at your boots. You have to be careful moving quickly. Men have gotten stuck or twisted ankles in this goo. As rain clouds darken the sky prematurely, evening approaches. Dusk is another tense time, mirroring the morning. The call goes out for stand to again at sunset. All along the trench, you and your comrades clamber back onto the firing step, peering warily into the gathering gloom. Often, attacks come at dusk, just like dawn. The half-light is ideal for creeping up. So once again, you go through that routine of heart-thudding, readiness, bayonet fixed, finger on trigger, trying to distinguish shapes in the dim distance. The rain has stopped for now, leaving a mist. Ghostly silhouettes of barbed wire play tricks on your eyes. Suddenly, boom! A flare bursts overhead, fired from your lines or theirs, you're not sure. It illuminates no man's land in harsh white light, casting jumping shadows. For a moment everything is bright as day. You freeze. You hear rattling and realize it's the machine gun a few trenches over unleashing fire, its tracers streaking red through the night. Did they see something? Are the Germans coming? Your heart leaps into your throat. You snug your rifle tighter and prepare for chaos. Shouts echo. Stand to! Stand to! Though you're already doing it. Another flare whooshes up and pops, floating down under a little parachute. In its glow, you catch sight of what might be figures out in front. Moved by adrenaline, you fire a shot. Others start firing too, a crackling fusillade at phantom targets. The machine gun continues its angry tat-tat-tat-tat. You're blinking from the muzzle flash in the dark, ears ringing from the sudden explosion of sound in the confined trench. The smell of cordite, gunpowder, fills the air, sharp and bitter. After a minute or two of this, the officer calls to cease fire. The flares die out, plunging the scene back into nearly complete darkness, aside from the dim grey of a clouded moon. You strain to listen. No return gunfire from the enemy, no yelling or rush of feet. It might have been a false alarm. Perhaps our sentries got jittery or saw a couple of German scouts moving and opened up. Or maybe the Germans tried a small patrol that got chased off. You'll probably never know. These scares are common, and they jangle everyone's nerves. You swallow, realizing your mouth is bone dry and your hands are trembling a little from the adrenaline overdose. But you also feel a tiny surge of dark glee. You fired your rifle. You showed them you're alert. If someone was out there, you hope you gave them a fright. Gradually things calm down. The officer double-checks that everyone's okay. One man twisted his ankle jumping to the fire step. Another got a graze on his hand from a splinter, likely from our own gun's recoil. Minor things. You reload the few rounds you spent, making sure your magazine is full again. Night has truly fallen now, a blackness broken only by the occasional star shell or distant explosion on some far-off front. Night in the trenches does not mean sleep, at least not for all. In fact, night time is the busiest time. The darkness provides cover for all the risky tasks you can't do under the sun. Once it's deemed dark enough that enemy snipers can't pick you off easily, orders come to organize work parties and patrols. You draw one of the lucky straws. You're assigned to a ration party tonight, rather than a patrol into no man's land. Given the choices, you'll gladly take hauling supplies over crawling through barbed wire under fire. A ration party means you and a few others have to go back to the rear supply dump and bring up food, water and ammo to resupply your trench. It's still dangerous. The paths are often shelled, and they're usually done at night to avoid enemy observation. But at least you're not seeking a fight. You quietly gather your kit and prepare to move. The ration party is assembled. 5 of you, led by a corporal who's been back and forth to the rear a dozen times. Before leaving, you sling your rifle and perhaps fix the bayonet, just in case. You tug on a fresher pair of gloves, since you'll be carrying crates and don't want more blisters, and you make sure your gas mask is in easy reach. A nighttime gas attack is a nightmare scenario, and you can't be caught without your mask. The current masks are bulky things, a hood with goggles and a filter box, or a newer respirator that covers your face with a snout. They're cumbersome, but better than choking to death on poison. Ready to go, you climb up a zigzag communication trench that leads backward from the front line. It's pitch dark. You pat the walls as you move, boots squelching. No lanterns. You move in blackout conditions to avoid drawing artillery fire. You feel strangely naked without the trench walls high on either side now. The communication trench is shallower, and eventually you reach ground level behind the lines. There is a narrow, beaten path known as a sapper track or mule track, which connects forward and rear areas. In some places it's just boardwalks over mud. In others, a dirt trail. The night air is cold and damp. The drizzle from earlier has left everything glistening faintly under a sliver of moon that peeks through. It's quiet except for distant booms and a low murmur of activity from trenches all along the front. You stick close with your party, walking in single file, keeping voices to a whisper. Every now and then a flare goes up in the distance, and you freeze until it dims. A moving silhouette can draw machine gun fire or a sniper shot even at night if seen against the flare light. So you become like statues when the sky briefly lights. On the way, you pass a stretcher team coming from the front. 4 men carry a limp figure on a canvas stretcher heading to a dressing station. In the dark, you can't see details, but the groans of the wounded man tell you enough. Maybe he stepped on a shell hole wrong or caught a stray bullet during that flare-up at dusk. Or maybe he has trench fever and collapsed. You silently step aside to let them by. It strikes you that going backward through the lines at night, even if to fetch heavy supplies, feels oddly safer and a relief. For those few minutes you're away from the immediate front, and you almost feel your soul uncoil a fraction from its constant crouch. You reach the rear supply depot, perhaps just a designated spot, in a ruined barn or a sunken road behind a hill. There quartermasters have left boxes of rations, water cans, and ammunition for your unit. You also see mailbags and, to your delight, a sack of fresh bread and a tub that possibly contains some hot stew kept warm for units coming off duty. But those might be for others rotating out. Your priority is getting the essentials to your trench, so each of you hefts a load. 2 guys carry a wooden crate full of canned food and bread. Another 2 carry boxes of ammunition. Rifle rounds are heavy in bulk, and you get tasked with a jerry can of water in each hand. Each can holds several gallons. You grunt as you lift them. They're awfully weighty, sloshing as you walk. You can't help but think how precious this water is, and how it might have come from some far-off river, then trucked and finally hauled by men like you, so that tomorrow you can have a sip of tea. The trek back to the front with full loads is even slower. Your shoulders ache, fingers numbing around the metal handles. Mud makes every step precarious. The corporal hisses for everyone to be careful and quiet. A dropped ammo box that spills with a loud clang could bring down shells on you, since the enemy has ears out listening for movement. You grit your teeth and carry on, 1 step at a time. By now it's fully dark. You navigate mostly by feel and memory, plus perhaps a small shaded flashlight the corporal uses with a hand over it when needed. Nearing the front line again, you hear the noise level rising. Closer gunshots and occasional shouts. Another unit's trench to your left seems to be engaged in a raiding party. You hear a sudden rattle of grenades and wild yells in German. It's not your concern unless it spreads, but it puts a spring in your step to get to your own trench and relative cover. Hopefully those raiders don't swing by your sector. Raids are common. Small groups try to slip into enemy trenches to kill, capture, or just wreak havoc for a few minutes, then retreat. They're terrifying if you're on the receiving end, and dangerous but perversely exciting if you're the one raiding. You've not been on one yet, but you dread the order every time a briefing is called. Finally, sweating and panting, you and the ration party clamber back into your trench with the goods. A few of your mates quietly cheer at the sight of fresh supplies. You pass the water cans down. Immediately, mess tins are out, eager to get a top-up of clean, if chemical-tasting water. You distribute the food crate contents, more tins of bully beef and stew, some bags of army biscuit, a case of tinned jam, some bags of tea, sugar, salt, also mail for those who didn't get theirs earlier, and tobacco refills. It's like a mini Christmas whenever rations come. Not that it's luxurious, but even a new pair of socks or a small portion of rum, sometimes they send extra rum with rations, can hugely boost morale. While you were gone, a hot meal arrived from the field kitchen for those in the trench. Timing is good. You get to partake. Men line up with their mess tins to get a ladle of hot stew or soup that's been brought in large thermos canisters. Tonight, it's a thin pea soup with bits of bacon. It's lukewarm at best, but you're not complaining. You gulp it down and feel warmth spread through your insides. Actual hot food, what a luxury. It's astonishing how something so simple can make you momentarily content in a place like this. Darkness also means it's time to catch up on tasks like repairing the barbed wire out in front of your trench. Remember that before, in daylight, you couldn't poke your nose out. But at night, working parties clamber over the top to fix and strengthen the wire defenses while, hopefully, unseen. You're not on wire duty tonight, a relief since that's scary work. But you watch as a half-dozen silhouettes from your company go over with heavy gloves, stakes and spools of rusted barbed wire. They move quietly into no man's land, periodically stopping and crouching when a flare goes up or a machine gun probe fire stitches across the dark. They likely feel like the walking dead out there, fully exposed aside from darkness. One man carries a mallet, gently driving new wooden posts in. Others string the wire, its barbs glinting briefly when light catches. Your trench's machine gunners keep their weapon aimed outwards, ready to fire in support if those men get discovered and come under attack. It's nerve-wracking just watching them. Tonight, luck is with them. The wire is mended, and the party slips back in after an hour, unscathed except for one guy who sliced his palm on a barb. The medics wrap it. He'll be fine if infection doesn't set in. Always that caveat. Your own small group's duty done. You are allowed to stand down for a bit. Perhaps now, near midnight, you can rest. You find a relatively drier section of trench or a corner of the dugout to curl up. You keep all your gear on, rifle within reach, bayonet fixed or at least ready, helmet on or right next to you. Pack as a pillow. You have to be ready to go from zero to combat in seconds if something happens, but you do allow yourself to relax slightly. You're so bone-tired that even the uncomfortable position and the constant background noise of war, distant artillery, the occasional rattle of gunfire, the scurry of rats, can't keep you fully awake. Just as you drift into a light sleep, Mother Nature calls. Damn. The rum, tea and water you drank have caught up with you. With a grumble, you carefully ease back out, trying not to wake a buddy snoring softly nearby. You make your way to that latrine bucket area in the dark. The smell guides you. Privacy? None. But at least it's dark and most guys are occupied or sleeping, so you have the makeshift toilet to yourself for the moment. Let's spare the graphic details. Suffice to say, it's an exercise in maintaining balance so you don't accidentally fall into something awful, and speed to get out of the stench zone quickly. You've long since stopped being squeamish about such things. Modesty doesn't exist here. When you gotta go, you go, whether in a tin, a pit, or a quiet section of trench. Toilet paper? Ha. Maybe some crepe paper from ammunition packing, or an old newspaper if you're lucky. Otherwise, rag scraps or nothing. You handle your business as efficiently as possible, toss a bit of dirt in the bucket to keep flies down and retreat. Another ignominious moment in a day filled with them, but you feel a bit more comfortable after. Back to your sleeping spot. On the way, you nearly trip over something soft in the dark mud. You recoil, thinking it's a body. Bending down, you realize it's a dead rat, swollen to the size of a cat, half buried in muck. Someone probably whacked it earlier. You pick it up by the tail and chuck it over the trench wall. No point leaving the carcass to rot with you inside. The smell is bad enough. This reminds you. The rats are particularly active at night. As you settle down again, you hear them, skittering sounds along the trench floor and overhead on the parapets. You've seen them boldly trotting along like they own the place. These aren't timid little mice. They're huge, brazen trench rats, fat from feasting on garbage and unfortunately sometimes on the unburied dead. You tug your blanket around you and shudder. You've heard horror stories of rats nibbling on sleeping men, going after food crumbs in pockets or even biting fingers. One fellow swore a rat bit his ear in the night. They're that fearless. You absent-mindedly check that your pockets have no leftover biscuit or anything that might attract them. Then you place your bayonet by your side. A couple of swift stabs at a bold rat might save your skin and rations. At last you drift off, huddled in your damp corner. Your last waking thought is that tomorrow will be another day of the same. Another day of mud, fear and survival. But also another day closer, you hope, to this war ending, or to your next leave, or at least to rotating out of the front line for a spell. The word is, in a few days your battalion will go back to a reserve trench for a week. That means relative safety, maybe even a chance to wash properly and sleep the whole night without standing watch. Rumours say there might be a mobile bathhouse, a tent with big tubs of hot water where you can soak and scrub months of dirt off your skin. You'd kill for that. And clean uniforms deloused, free of itchy pests, at least for a little while. The mere thought is heavenly. With that tiny hope nestled in your mind, you finally sleep as the trench world carries on around you. Not so fast. Your day isn't over yet. It's the witching hour, around 3 a.m., when you suddenly jolt awake to a terrifying sound, whistles blowing down the How trench and the frantic cry of "Stand to! Gas! Gas! Gas!" In an instant, pure reflex and training kick in. Your heart explodes with panic as you fumble for your gas mask in the dark. Your fingers, numb from cold and sleep, nearly drop it as you yank it out of its satchel. Around you, men are scrambling, coughing, shouting. The word gas sends a unique chill through every soldier. We've all seen what poison gas can do. You manage to pull the mask's straps over your head, yanking the hood down and sealing it around your face. It's a claustrophobic, awful feeling, like having your head in a stuffy plastic bag. The goggles fog slightly with your breath, and you suck air through the filter with effort. An acrid chemical smell hits your nose, probably the mask's chemical neutralizers reacting. Moments after masking up, you hear a muffled pop, pop, pop and realize those are gas shell explosions out in no man's land. Or maybe gas projectors. A greenish-yellow cloud is creeping toward the trench, just visible in the night. The gas alarm came just in time. You pray everyone got their masks on. A guy to your left is swearing between muffled breaths. His mask's strap broke, and he's desperately holding it to his face manually. You can smell chlorine now, a bleach-like odor, even through the mask filter, which is alarming. It means the concentration is high. But the mask should protect you from the worst. All around you hear the dread sounds of those who didn't get sealed in time, choked coughing, gurgling, cries for help. You can't do anything for them yet. You can't even see clearly who's hit. You just squat low. Gas is heavier than air. It will sink into trenches. You hope the breeze will dissipate it quickly. For what feels like forever, perhaps 5 minutes, you stay under mask as the cloud passes. Your eyes sting. Skin that's exposed, like your wrists, itch and burn a little. But you're alive. The coughing and groaning from a few yards down the trench, however, indicates some aren't so lucky. Eventually, the all clear is given by word of mouth. The gas has mostly blown past or settled. You keep your mask on a bit longer just in case. When you finally remove it, the air still carries a bitter, peppery smell that makes you want to gag. But at least you can breathe normally. A quick status check. 2 men in your company got a full dose of gas. One is lying at the bottom of the trench, writhing. His breathing is a wet rasp, and even in the dark you can see foam around his mouth. Chlorine gas turns to acid in the lungs. He's basically drowning internally. It's horrific. The other is sitting against the wall, coughing up blood, eyes streaming. The medics come, but there's little they can do here. Those men need fresh air and medical care far away, if they even survive long enough to get it. They'll be carried to the rear as soon as possible, but everyone knows it's likely a death sentence. You feel sick, and not just from a whiff of the gas. This is the part of war that fills you with a cold hatred, faceless death, silent and cruel. Bullets and shells, at least there's some immediate bravado to them. Gas is just silent horror. After this rude awakening, it's nearly morning again. No point trying to sleep. You're all rattled and busy caring for the casualties. The sun creeps up over the battlefield, revealing a ghastly scene of low-lying chemical fog and dewy barbed wire. It's eerily quiet after the gas attack. Sometimes gas attacks are followed by infantry assaults, hit them while they're disoriented. But not this time. It was likely just a harassment or test. The day shift takes over fully now as everyone stands to at dawn once more, masks at the ready in case of more. Thus, a new day on the Western Front begins much like the last. You running on just a snatch of disturbed sleep, bloodshot eyes behind your grime-smeared face, still alive. Congratulations, you survived a full day and night in a WW1 trench, but you're shaking, exhausted, and mentally frayed, and you have to do it all over again. Could you last another day? Another week? Most modern people, used to soft beds and safety, wouldn't last hours in these conditions, let alone days. Even the tough soldiers of 1916 are hanging on by threads of discipline, comradeship, and sheer numbness to the horror. The reality is that trench life is a meat grinder of the body and soul. On average, a frontline soldier only spent a few days at a time in the very front trench because conditions were so brutal and the attrition so constant. Units rotated to support lines and rear areas to recover some strength. If they didn't, they'd all go mad or die in place eventually. The life expectancy of an officer on the front lines in some sectors was measured in weeks. For enlisted, it depended, but new replacements, fresh fish, as they were sometimes called, often perished within their first month during major battles. The trenches themselves claimed tens of thousands through illness, accident, or random shell, without even an attack occurring. So, why wouldn't you last a day? Well, ask yourself if you could handle this. Waist-deep mud sucking at you, rats crawling over you, lice feasting on your blood, the air choking with the smell of death and waste. The food monotonous and often revolting, eaten under the stress of knowing it might be your last meal. No proper sleep, constant stress, constant fear, knowing a bullet or shell could obliterate you without warning, having to relieve yourself in a tin can in front of your friends while shells scream overhead, watching your comrades, people you've joked with, shared a smoke with, get blown to bits or choke on gas, and being powerless to help them, and through it all, holding on to your sanity, keeping your rifle clean and ready, and doing your duty, because if you don't, you let everyone else down. The modern inconveniences that annoy us, slow internet, traffic, a bad cell signal, the wrong milk in our latte, these are paradise compared to 1 hour in a trench. We complain if the AC is too cold. These soldiers got frostbite in winter and heat stroke in summer, often while wearing the same filthy uniform day in, day out. We grumble about doing laundry. They had to literally burn off vermin from their laundry because washing machines were a distant dream. We get upset if our food delivery is late. They sometimes subsisted on stale bread and canned meat for weeks, and if they were lucky, it wasn't spoiled or infested with maggots. Think about mental health too. You have apps to calm you, music, therapy options. In the trenches, if you broke down from the stress, which thousands did, the shell shock cases were staggering, you might be called a coward. Some were even executed by their own army for failing to go back to the fight, when in reality they were traumatized beyond functioning. The understanding and treatment of psychological trauma was tragically lacking, so soldiers bottled it up, or found solace in gallows humor and brotherhood, or in letters from home. But many carried those mental scars for the rest of their lives. Some would wake up screaming from nightmares decades later, reliving the bombardments and the gas. Yet incredibly, amid this hell, humanity endured. Soldiers formed deep friendships. They sang songs to keep their spirits up. "We're here because we're here," they'd sing to the tune of Auld Lang Syne, a bleak little joke of a song. They celebrated little holidays. On Christmas, if the war allowed, they'd decorate a tiny tree or share makeshift presents. There's the famous Christmas truce of 1914. Early in the war, when the bitterness hadn't fully set, British and German soldiers along parts of the front spontaneously stopped fighting on Christmas Eve. They sang carols across the lines. By morning, some bold souls climbed out of their trenches, unarmed, and met in no man's land. Imagine that. Yesterday you were trying to kill each other. Today you're shaking hands. They exchanged small gifts like buttons, badges, chocolate, or cigarettes. There are even accounts of a friendly soccer match being played on the shell-blasted ground between the trenches. For a few magical hours, the war ceased, and these young men remembered their shared humanity. It didn't last, of course. Commands on both sides eventually ordered them back to hostility, and the war ground on bloodier than ever. But that truce lives on as a poignant reminder that even in the deepest darkness, kindness and camaraderie can flicker to life. For you, though, a modern person dropped into this horror show, you'd be overwhelmed by the first whiff of a trench latrine, the first burst of gunfire over your head, the first time you saw a rat the size of a cat staring at you with hungry eyes. Could you charge into machine gun fire when the whistle blows? Could you live ankle-deep in corpses and mud for days? Could you hold it together while the earth itself quakes under an artillery bombardment that lasts hours, plastering you with mud and the blood of your friends? Even if you somehow survived 24 hours physically, the psychological shock would be immense. The soldiers who endured this weren't superhuman. They were mostly ordinary young men, but they were toughened by necessity, bonded by shared struggle and often just running on duty and autopilot. Many had no choice. A refusal meant shame, or prison, or a firing squad. So they steeled themselves and went through with it, hearts pounding and teeth clenched, praying they might see tomorrow. When we romanticize war, the bravery, the medals, the strategies, we often gloss over the day-to-day misery of the poor infantryman. Trench warfare in WW1 is perhaps the pinnacle of human misery in modern memory. Industrial slaughter coupled with medieval living conditions. It's not glorious, it's not noble, it's survival at its rawest. The heroes were often not those charging with bayonets, but those who simply kept going, kept their friends alive if they could, and didn't lose their compassion. As the morning sun of day 2 in the trench rises, you reflect. You've seen more suffering in one day here than most people see in a lifetime. It's a sobering thought. And yet, soldiers found ways to live. They wrote poems about larks singing amidst the guns. They made trench art, carving up shell casings into keepsakes. They even found humor, making jokes about the food, giving sarcastic nicknames to the relentless lice. Our little friends, they'd say. Humans are remarkably adaptable, sometimes sadly so, to even the worst environments. But you, time traveler from a cozy bed and climate-controlled home, you would be a wreck. If you didn't die or get gravely wounded, you'd be shivering, crying, perhaps begging to be evacuated after just a day, and no one would blame you. It was that bad. Tonight, when you nestle into your clean sheets, spare a thought for the millions who spent night after night in those trenches so that we wouldn't have to. They endured nightmare conditions on our behalf, and many never came home. Next time your Wi-Fi is slow or your coffee is lukewarm, you might recall that somewhere in 1916 a young soldier would gladly trade places with you, slow internet and all, if it meant a roof, a bath, and not getting shot at. The Great War's trenches are long gone now, overgrown by grass and flowers. But the lessons remain. War is truly hell, and the everyday courage of those who withstood it is staggering. So be grateful for the peace and comfort you have. And remember, if ever you think I could handle living back then, a single day in a WW1 trench would likely prove otherwise. Sleep tight, knowing that you live in far gentler times, and spare a gentle thought for those who once tried to sleep in a waterlogged trench, boots on, rifle in hand, heart heavy, dreaming of the world we now get to live in. Good night, and thank you for listening. Stay safe and be kind to each other. You never know what challenges others have faced.